These are 5 running backs who will be massive busts in fantasy football this season, and I'm just simply not drafting them. Starting at number 5, Rachaad White. White saw 336 touches last year, which was only second to Christian McCaffrey, yet White still only finished as the RB10 in fantasy points per game. If you're getting that much volume, you should be, I know RB10 is nice, but you should be a lot higher than that. And the reason why White wasn't much higher is because he was a terribly inefficient back, averaging 3.6 yards per carry. He was 42nd in missed tackles forced, 40th in explosive run rate, and 45th in yards after contact per attempt. That's not going to get it done. And honestly, the reason why White saw so much work is because you would have had to pay Tampa Bay a lot of money to put Keyshawn Vaughn or Chase Edmonds on the football field last year. They just didn't like either of those two guys. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Tampa Bay spent a 4th round pick on running back Bucky Irving, who I think is a really nice back. People say he's undersized. Sure, but what about James Cook and Devon Achane? 2 really undersized backs that had 2 really good years. We're actually going to talk about one of those guys later in this video. Bucky Irving is a very explosive back, something that Rachaad White is not. And while Irving probably will have to work on his NFL pass protection, that can be improved upon, I still do think he steals away valuable reps from White, as well as pass down work if he can prove to be a good blocker. And Rachaad White's ADP on Underdog right now is 59th overall, which is a 5th round pick. And so you could argue that some of the risks that I just talked about are already baked into his cost. I would still rather avoid White and take someone like Anthony Richardson, who's going right around the same place that White is on Underdog drafts right now. Moving on to number 4, I have Alvin Kamara. Alvin is coming off a spectacular year that shocked a lot of people, myself included. He was RB3 in fantasy points per game. He was a league winner for most. But if you take a deeper dive at the numbers, his advanced metrics as a runner continued to decline over the last couple years. He was 40th in missed tackles forced per attempt. That is just not good. A lot of his production came in the passing game. We know Derek Carr was the check down machine after he hurt his shoulder. I believe it was in week 3. His first read, it's always seemed like, oh, I'm just going to dump it down to Alvin, dump it down to Alvin. He had 10, 11, 12 plus target games. Absolutely insane, especially in PPR. But a lot of people are forgetting about Kendre Miller. I think he's being slept on right now. He was a rookie last year. He spent most of his first year injured. This might be crazy to say, but I think Kendre is already the more talented running back. As a runner, he's a very underrated receiver. And with Alvin Kamara being 29 years old this season, Kendre is the future. They're gonna use Kendre Miller more, I promise you that. And who knows, maybe Derek Carr doesn't check it down to either backs as often because of his healthy shoulder. I think Chris Olave is going to have a monster year. Alvin Kamara's situation is very similar to Rachaad White, as his risk is already kind of baked into his ADP, as Kamara is going in the 6th round in Underdog drafts right now. So some people are probably looking at this like that's a crazy value for Alvin. And trust me, I do see that argument, but I mean, I know it's risky to draft rookie receivers, but a guy like Ladd McConkey is right there. Or 10 or so picks later, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think has a monster season. Deontay Johnson, I just don't really like running back in that spot. In conclusion, I'm avoiding Alvin. I think a lot of people are going to be reaching on him after his spectacular year. But all in all, Kendre is going to be involved. I don't think Derek Carr checks it down as much. And Miller is going to steal a lot of pass down reps. People don't realize how good of a receiver Kendre Miller is as a back. You're going to see that this season. That's going to hurt Alvin even more. I'm completely out on Kamara this season. The 3rd running back, you're going to start to catch on to a theme here. Inefficient running backs, I don't like taking big bets on. Personally, at number 3, we have Josh Jacobs coming off a horrible final year in Vegas. I know 2 years ago he was the rushing champ. He was spectacular, and he's still relatively a young back at only 26 years old. Jacobs ranked 44th in yards after contact per attempt. Just looked really, really bad last year. He lacked explosiveness, juice. He was getting tackled immediately, wasn't breaking much of anything. And while I will admit, he's in a much better situation in Green Bay. He's on a potent offense. He's got a brilliant play caller, Matt LaFleur, who likes to scheme his guys open in a very creative way. very nice offensive line the Packers have. Jordan Love, in my opinion, is already an elite quarterback, which is a huge upgrade from Aiden O'Connell. I get it. I hear all those arguments. Another concern that I have is that the Packers, historically, under Matt LaFleur, like to use 2 running backs, and they spent a 3rd-round pick on Marshawn Lloyd, who is a very explosive running back. He's a home run hitter. He's a nice pass catcher out of the backfield. Extremely talented. And I just don't think there's a world where Jacobs is just the workhorse. I could be wrong. I get it. We gotta temper expectations with rookie running backs, because last year we all know how that went. Tank Bigsby, was gonna vulture work from Travis Etienne. Bigsby was horrible. Zach Charbonnet did eat into Kenneth Walker's work a little bit, but he didn't have much standalone value at all. So we do have to ease off on the rookie running backs. I get it. I'll say this. Jacobs is either gonna be an RB2 or he's gonna be a top 5 back. I don't think there's a world anywhere else other than that. I personally don't think he's going to be a top 5 back, but I do see the argument. I'm out on Josh Jacobs at cost this year, as he's going as the RB11 in underdog drafts. Right now, he's actually going right before Trey McBride. If I'm in that spot and I have Trey McBride and Josh Jacobs on the board, I am taking Trey McBride 10 times out of 10. It's not even close for me. So there you have it. At number 2, I have James Cook. Cook was terribly inefficient last year. And yes, I get it. Once Joe Brady took over, he finally wasn't losing snaps to 70-year-old Latavius Murray. He was a different back down the stretch, but if you still look at the numbers, 26% of his total fantasy points came on 2 games, week 14, week 15. One of those games was where he absolutely shredded the Dallas Cowboys. I get it. I get the hype. I get the talent, but I hate the situation. And James Cook doesn't score rushing touchdowns. Why would you want to draft a running back on your team who's capped in that sense? Especially in touchdowns, right? James Cook has 4 rushing touchdowns over his first 2 years in Buffalo. That is horrendous. They don't use him in the red zone. They don't like to use him in the red zone. I vividly remember one of his rushing touchdowns. I believe he had 2 total rushing touchdowns last year. One of them, Josh Allen practically picked him up and pushed him into the end zone at like the 2-yard line. So, I mean, if that tells you anything, they don't like to use him in the red zone. And to make matters worse, they drafted Ray Davis, who is a bowling ball. He is a touchdown goal line savant. He's actually a really good pass catcher as well. I think this is terrible news for James Cook. Terrible news for Cook Dynasty owners. I think Ray Davis is going to be heavily involved. And at number 1, this is going to make a lot of people mad. I've lost Twitter followers because I posted this a couple days ago. Kyren Williams, you guys. This is very controversial. I get it. I understand. Kyren is coming off a magical season. Outside of getting injured, everything went perfectly for Kyren. Get this stat. He averaged a touchdown on every 14 touches last year. That is better than Christian McCaffrey, who averaged a touchdown on every 16 touches. It's insane. It's not sustainable. And the Rams drafted a running back that reminds me of Kyren. He might be even better than Kyren in Blake Corum. You guys have to understand situations, and don't just pick players because they went off last year, so that's going to be the same this year. Situations in the NFL change. They drafted Blake Corum. Who did they have at running back last year to compete for carries with Kyren? Darrell Henderson? Like, Cam Akers was gone. Darrell Henderson I don't even know if he's on a team right now. Shouldn't even be an NFL running back. He had no competition for touches, so when he got hurt, which he gets hurt often, Kyren has only played 22 out of 34 possible games since he's entered the league. That's not great for a guy that has ankle injuries, foot injuries. He's already been hurt with a foot injury this offseason. I know he's back at practice, but like, red flag alert. He's already hurt and no one's hitting him. He's already managing his foot and he hasn't even played an NFL game. Training camp isn't even started yet. Here's where my biggest concern with Kyren lies. And I know you can't predict injuries. You can't assume that a player is injury prone. Like, Christian McCaffrey was injury prone over those 2 years and now he's not, right? So Kyren could have these foot ankle injuries and then they'd be gone. They're just gone. I get it. But if Kyren gets injured, Blake Corum is going to come in. And if Blake Corum dominates or has a lot of success in that time when Kyren's gone, which could very well happen, I don't see a world where when Kyren comes back, they just completely bench Blake Corum, because the smart coaching staff, and you can make the argument, oh, well, Sean McVay likes to only use one back. Look at Todd Gurley. Look at what he's done in the past. True. But Sean McVay is also not an idiot, and if Kyren continues to get hurt, they're going to be smart with his reps because they want him to be available in the playoffs. They don't care about our fantasy team. They don't care about any of that. Sean McVay is a very, very smart coach, and if Blake Corum is playing at a high level, he's going to work in both backs. And right now, when you're drafting Kyren in the second, third round, you're banking on him to be a workhorse. You're drafting him. I know his ADP's dropped a little bit with the whole foot thing. And so maybe you could say you're not drafting him at a ceiling. You're not spending a first round pick on him. I get it. But if he gets hurt, and even if he doesn't get hurt, if Sean McVay wants to see what they have in Blake Corum, they're like, oh, Blake Corum is a nice 1B, right? This is going to be a shared backfield. So that's where my concern lies. I don't think Kyren is going to see the volume that he saw last year. He also wasn't very involved in the passing game, which, drafting a running back who is a good receiving back is huge, especially in PPR leagues. Kyren was 58th in yards per route run. So you can't even bank on the receiving upside really with Kyren, because Blake could steal those snaps too. All players in the NFL are athletic, but Kyren tested horribly at the NFL Combine. He's not a Breece Hall. He's not going to win on his athleticism alone. I know some of his advanced metrics last year were really good. So this isn't just a volume thing. I will be the first one to admit that. But his volume was insane, which is definitely part of the reason why he had such an insane monster season. So I don't think he sees that incredible volume this year. I just don't think that happens. And so you're going to have to pay a hefty price, a fairly hefty price, if you want to get Kyren on your team. You're dealing with the injury risk. You're dealing with Blake Corum. You're dealing with decreased volume. I'm out on Kyren. I know a lot of people love Kyren. That's fine. He won't be on any of my fantasy teams. I appreciate you guys watching this whole video. See you next time.